Hey everybody, and welcome to Unit 3. This is we're starting a brand new unit, and in this unit we're going to talk about matter and energy in living systems. And what we're going to talk about is how does this energy and how does this matter get moved from organism to organism? And really it's going to be through photosynthesis and then through consuming for organisms that eat in a process called cellular respiration, and how the energy is going to come in from the sun and be trapped or captured and turned into chemical energy by plants. And then when organisms eat plants, how that energy is released. So we're going to start with photosynthesis on 3.1, and it's going to be a pretty complex situation here. So let's make sure we're paying attention. We'll dive into it here. So matter and energy in photosynthesis. And so the most important thing for you to understand is that all matter is going to cycle around our planet. And living systems are going to take in energy and matter, but then they're going to convert them to the forms that they need. So producers, which are plants, for example, are going to obtain energy from the sun. So they're going to capture light energy and convert it into chemical energy. And so what that talks about is it's going to take energy from the sun and turn into a molecule called glucose, or sugar. The chemical energy takes the form of chemical bonds in sugar molecules. So those covalent bonds that we talked about in Unit 2, they are going to store energy from the sun. They're going to store that energy in those bonds. And then the plants or animals that eat the plants are going to be able to break down sugar and release the energy from the sun. And that's what we've got to do. So we got a picture of a panda here eating these plants. It's an herbivore, and what we're doing is that panda is releasing the energy stored in the molecules in those plants in order to get energy and use it. So what is photosynthesis? So plants, algae, and some bacteria are going to go through a process called photosynthesis, and that is how we're going to take light energy and convert it into chemical energy. And we're also going to produce sugar and oxygen as a byproduct, right? Plants don't need oxygen, but they're going to produce it, and thank goodness for that because we need it. But they're going to take in carbon dioxide and water, and they're going to be able to make sugar. So they're going to capture and transform that light into high energy sugar molecules, glucose. Both plants and animals are going to use the sugar molecule. So plants are actually going to take in sunlight and carbon dioxide and water, and they're going to turn that into sugar and oxygen. The oxygen is going to release, and down here we'll see, here in a minute, we'll see the formula. But it's going to release that oxygen, which we're going to need, but that sugar molecules, not only are they going to store them, that way when herbivores or omnivores like us eat those plants, we can get the sugar, but the plants are actually going to use that sugar that it's made in order to survive. So here's a little graph which I think is interesting. So what over here we have a plant, and these leaves are going to be going through photosynthesis. So plants need carbon dioxide and water. And so what's going to happen is the carbon dioxide inside of this glass jar, the carbon dioxide starts very high, and the oxygen actually starts very low. And what's going to happen is these plants, as it gets sunlight and it takes in carbon dioxide and water, it is going to go through photosynthesis. So when it takes in carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide in this jar is going to start to go down because it's using it. What's going to happen to the oxygen is going to start to rise because these plants are going to produce oxygen as a byproduct. So the oxygen is going to increase and the carbon dioxide is going to increase. It's what we call gas exchange. Now notice that when we have humans in cellular respiration are actually going to do the difference. We're going to take in carbon dioxide and we are going to create or exhale carbon dioxide. So as we scroll down here, here is the formula for photosynthesis. So the reactants, right? We call the left side of the chemical equation the reactants. And that's what goes into the formula. It goes into the equation. So what plants are going to take in is carbon dioxide, CO2, and water, H2O. They're also going to take in sunlight energy. And when we do this, when we do the chemical reaction, plants are going to create oxygen, O2, which is what they release. And then this right here is glucose. And this is where the energy goes. The energy is going to be trapped in here. Okay, so here is light in photosynthesis. So now we're going to talk about what light is actually used in photosynthesis. So it's in a form of electromagnetic radiation, and plants are going to absorb only visible light. So here is the giant chart or the example of different kinds of electromagnetic radiation. And you guys have heard about these things: X-rays, microwaves, radio waves. That you'll notice that the waves are different lengths. And these are shorter or more high intensity energy, gamma rays, than radio waves, which are going to be a lot less energy and a longer wavelength. However, they are going to travel further. So that's why sound is traveled through a radio wave, is because it's going to travel a great distance. Where X-rays are going to be high energy, right? But they're going to be a lot shorter rays, and they don't work near as far. That's why when you get an X-ray, it's a very close proximity in order for it to work. They put that machine right up next to you. Okay, so as we go and we look at our visible light, right? So over here is our purple. This is our rainbow, right? Our Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo is in here, and violet. But what we're talking about is the purple and the violet are going to be much shorter wavelengths, but they are higher in energy, right? It's going to be going up and down quicker. So a wavelength is the distance from the top to the next top. So if we look at X-rays, right, this is the wavelength right there. However, if we go look at radio waves, this would be a wavelength, right? So we're talking about a greater distance than we would over here. So as we talk about purple, they're going to have a shorter wavelength, which is higher energy, and the red is going to have a longer wavelength, which is lower energy. But that's how, when it hits that spectrum, this is the color light we see. It says in plant cells, light absorption and photosynthesis takes place inside of an organelle called the chloroplast. And so the chloroplast is the organelle where photosynthesis occurs. That's important for you to know. The chloroplast is where photosynthesis occurs, and it's going to take place on these little thylakoid membranes, okay? And the thylakoids are these little discs, and that's where photosynthesis is going to occur. As we scroll down, it says different types of chlorophyll absorb different wavelengths of light. So what we're talking about is different types of chlorophyll are going to absorb the different amounts of light coming in through this spectrum. Also, we'll talk about here in a minute, the light that we see is actually the light being reflected. So when we see a plant that is green, all of these wavelengths of light are being absorbed and the green is being reflected. When you see a red rose, right, you're getting red light being reflected and the rest is being absorbed. Okay, so what you see is what gets reflected, right? And as we scroll down here, that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, now also there are plants that live in very dark areas where there is no sunlight. So plants that live on the ocean floor, how are those plants going to get sunlight? Well, and then in turn, how are they going to produce their own energy? And the quick answer is they don't get sunlight. And so what they've had to do is they've had to come up with another way in order to create energy. So they've tweaked photosynthesis a little bit, and what they're going to use is they're going to use hydrogen sulfide. So these vents that these plants live by are going to produce hydrogen sulfide in the water. And these hydrothermal vents are going to support, because these plants have changed the formula. So instead of doing normal photosynthesis, they're going to do this process. So they're going to take in carbon dioxide that's in the water. They're going to take in hydrogen sulfide, and then they're going to also take in oxygen, and that's going to produce glucose. It's going to produce sulfur, atoms of sulfur, and then it's going to produce water molecules. So they've kind of tweaked photosynthesis, and they're going to do it a different way. But remember, this is what we're trying to make. That's sugar. That's glucose. So if plants can produce that, then they can make their own energy source. And so as we continue to talk about photosynthesis, we're also going to move into cellular respiration. But what that is we got to get the energy from the sun to the plants, but then we got to get it to the rest of the living organisms on the planet. And that's how cellular respiration is going to take place. So once again, thank you for joining me for this class notes. Remember to hang on to this and check back when we go to do our test.